Thank you.
Feature at reception, so we might need to wait a minute. But hopefully that's all the play people.
Why is there a big queue?
So people are just doing that.
Actually, I don't know that one.
People who like drama.
Do you want some water? Will you want water?
I've got a bottle of water somewhere.
We need water up here, don't we? Look at all the affirmations we've got. Breath, you're great.
Where do I sit when you're dripping on and you sit when I'm dripping on?
Should we go down here? Should we go next to John, or should we just? We don't want to be up here, do we? That's weird.
You can be for mine, because mine it's only brief, but I'll do mine and then piss off.
Should we go? Good morning, everybody. Hi, welcome. Can I just ask you to please take your seats in the next 3 to 4 minutes and we'll be starting. Thank you.
I'm not mentioning workshops and who's directing them until after. Just go and shift people from the coffee area.
Yeah. Where's Alexis? Oh, fuck.
Okay, these 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Can I have one step? There's no one at that side now, that's clear.
Okay. Okay, everyone, good morning. If I could get your attention, please. We are now ready to start, 15 minutes late in true conference style. I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Vicky to let her do some housekeeping bits.
Yeah, hi everyone, really nice to see people in person for the first time. This conference has been quite a long time coming. We've been on about doing one for years.
About 5 years.
Yeah, it is. COVID obviously got in the way, like it did for everyone. Then we had it planned for July, and then there was a general election. So third time lucky for us. Really, really pleased to see everyone here. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you as well to the people joining us on YouTube. More about that in a minute. So yeah, this coincides with our 21st birthday of the Survivors Trust. Lucy's going to tell us a bit more about that in a minute. But yeah, really, really nice to see everyone. Just want to do a quick thank you to people. So thank you so much to all our speakers, all our workshop leaders and our discussion group leaders. Thank you for your patience with the changed dates. Thank you for putting up with all my emails and demands. Hopefully it'll be worth it. And I just wanted to mention that when I sent out the email to people asking them to choose which workshop they wanted to attend, I got so many people coming back to me saying, I don't know, they're all really good, they're all so interesting, I can't choose. So that's a testament, I think, to the quality of people we've got here today. Some really interesting stuff going on. I want to thank the TST team as well. I'm not going to name them individually because this isn't the Oscars, but people have been working really hard, so thank you so much to everyone. Thanks as well to John, who's doing our filming, to Jessie and to Tracy, who's our photographer as well today. If you want to put your pictures on social media, that'll be grand if you can get a Wi-Fi signal. But yeah, let people know what's going on, let people know how good this will hopefully be. So I'm just going to do a bit of the venue information, just so people know where we are. It is on page 3 of your conference manual, but I'll just run you through it. So this is the Connect building. This is where all our conferencey stuff will take place. So the keynote speakers, the workshops, the discussion groups, and our sound bath and our Pilates activities as well. And then the eating, the drinking, the socialising will take place in the main conference building, which is a 4 or 5 minute walk, or probably the same in the car because it's a weird way round. But that's where everything is there. So you'll need a lanyard to access food and drink in the main building, and Lisa's been giving them out. But if you haven't got one, just grab us at the break time, that's fine. So we've got 2 rooms down here, everything's nicely labelled, 2 rooms upstairs. I want to tell you about the quiet room. So we've got a quiet room set up upstairs for anyone who just wants a bit of time out. I mean, the people who work in this sector know some pretty difficult subjects that we go through. If anyone just needs a bit of a break from it, a bit of time to themselves, look for the signs for our quiet room. We've got our helpline staff on hand. If anyone wants to talk to someone, that's absolutely fine. That's their bread and butter. Can be used as a prayer room, can be used as whatever you want it for, but just know that it's there. What else? Let me tell you about meal times. So lunch, we've got quite a narrow window for actually getting food. So that's 12:45 to 1:15 to actually get food. And then you've got the rest of the lunch break to do whatever you want. Evening meal is 6:30 to 7:15 down in the restaurant in the main building. And then we've got our drinks reception with complimentary, what is it?
Complimentary drinks and non-alcoholic drinks.
Yes.
And more networking, and we'll be hearing from Gillian about the history of TST.
Yep. And then we've got disco in the bar for those who wish to partake. But I know everyone will be knackered at the end of the day, especially being travelling, but do try and come and meet each other and network and big each other up and say how amazing we are, because we are. So please do join in with that. What else? So I've mentioned the live streaming. So all our keynote speeches in here are being recorded and going out on YouTube. If anyone has any issue with being recorded, that's absolutely fine. Just let us know and we'll make sure you're not on it. Completely fine with that. John does it all the time. He's used to dealing with people's requests like that. Obviously at the moment it's the backs of your heads anyway. We've got Tracy going around taking photos. Again, if you're not interested, just tell her. That's absolutely fine. I've already told her to back off, so no problem.
You've also got your photo opportunity.
Oh yeah. We've also got a photo opportunity here, if you're inclined, with our big lit up sign and our inflatable buddy. If you fancy it, do so. And we're putting messages on Buddy as well, if anyone fancies doing that. What else? I realise this building's a bit of a maze, but we've got the TST team on hand to help show you around. I'll tell you a bit more about that later when it comes to the workshops and stuff. Oh yeah, Lucy's just reminded me, you turn your phones off or on silent, please. For you, Wi-Fi, you should be connected, it's free. Look it up, it's Yarnfield. Anything else?
No.
Coffee, we've done coffee and tea. Just if you get lost, ask someone. We're everywhere, we've got badges on, we sort of know what we're doing, but we're really happy to help. That's the main thing. And I'll hand you over to Lucy.
I think that's it.
I think that's it for now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For now. Thank you very much, Vicky. Hi everyone, I'm Lucy, I work here at TST. You might have noticed that I am not our Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips, who was going to open. I also am not Faye Maxted, our wonderful CEO, Faye Maxted OBE. Unfortunately, she has a family emergency and she's not going to be with us for the next couple of days. But you are in very good hands with the TST team. And actually, Vicky didn't ask everyone to stand up. Team, TST team, can you all wave your hands, please? So if you have any questions or you need anything, please do come and find us. There's about 15 of us here to look after you and make sure that we have a really, really good couple of days. So I just want to add my own thank yous as well. Just as you can imagine, with some last minute changes, it's been a bit busy in the TST team headquarters the last couple of days, and everyone has just worked above and beyond to get us here today. And I just really want to thank the team. I know you're meant to do that at the end, but we have to make sure we do that at the beginning as well. And a big welcome to everyone who's joined us on YouTube as well. And hopefully Faye is watching us as well, where she is at the moment. So we will have more about that later on as well. We're here to celebrate 21 years of TST. I'd like to say that makes me feel old because TST started when I was an adult, which really does make me feel old now. It's an incredible achievement. And as Vicky said, we've had a lot of changes since we've come into existence. We all work in a really difficult subject, as we know, and the pressures on the sexual violence sector have never been greater. With COVID and changes to service delivery, increase in demand for services, in some cases which have been 850%. I know I don't need to tell many of you that here. Waiting lists are being closed, and it is increasingly difficult to get the people who need to make the change to listen, as we are all acutely aware. We've also got emerging online offences, criminal exploitation, and it can feel quite bleak, but that's why it's so good that we are all here together today. It's a really rare opportunity for us to meet in person. I want you to really celebrate these 2 days, take it as 2 days off away from your day job to network and to be inspired. We have some absolutely incredible speakers, as I'm sure you've seen. And as we have said, we will be filming them so you can go back to the ones you've missed. It's a real privilege to be in a room with all the people that are working so hard to make a difference. I don't want this to be a conference where we start talking about how awful child sexual abuse and sexual violence is. We know that, and we know the damage it causes. We know the ripple effects. We are here to network, to share, and to learn, and to come up with creative ways for change. And I hope that you will hear lots about that in the next 2 days. I'm going to tell you a bit more about TST now, because in its 21 years, it has just achieved absolutely incredible results. We have over 120 member agencies, and TST started when a group of people, I've got to be careful not to take over Gillian's speech here, when a group of people came together to say that actually the specialist charities that provide this life-saving support to people were being overlooked for funding, and people in the position of policy influence were not understanding the incredible impact that our organisations have. So TST was born to provide a network and as an umbrella organisation that could provide a national voice and provide training and provide networking opportunities, which it does, hence the reason we are all here now. In the last 2 years, we have trained 55 unique agencies, from Uber to the NHS to aerospace, PAL Aerospace. We've accepted over 80,000 calls to our helpline, and we are extremely proud, and there are lots of our team here today, of our ISVA programme. We have the highest qualification an ISVA can do in the country with our practitioner diploma. We also run many forums, and I'm really excited that you're going to be hearing from one of our forum members this morning as well. We have forums for ISVA service managers, we have forums for ISVAs, we have CHISVA forums, we have CEO forums, and we have survivor forums. I might have missed something out. No, I've done it. Thanks, Helen, great. And we also have UCAS accreditation. And then something that I'm a bit more involved in as well is we maintain dialogues with government ministers. We know we can't arrest our way out of this problem, and we know we can't provide counselling just for the survivors out of this problem. We are now faced with 500,000 children being abused every year and over 13 million adult survivors living with the effect of trauma, yet no statutory service has got specialist support for those people. Something has to change, and we're very aware of that. I really hope that we can improve that conversation while we're all here in the next few days. It's really important as well to think about how we change the delivery of this message. As I said, we obviously, with the increase of online abuse and the increase of how we access media, I'm sure, in fact, I think I can see many of you in this room that were talking about the sentencing that we had of another famous BBC individual whose name doesn't even deserve to be read out. We hear this more and more again, and actually, I don't know about you, but I just stopped taking media comments. This is getting really boring, that we keep pretending to be shocked by this. We need to change the conversation and change how we are delivering this as well. And that is something that also TST is really excited about. I don't know if any of you have had the pleasure to watch My Sexual Abuse, the sitcom. And if you haven't, you will see it tomorrow with our wonderful speaker, Mark O'Sullivan, who is here. And Mark has agreed to be TST ambassador. So we're really delighted to announce that today. Mark, can you stand up for us so we all know who you are? Thank you very much. Okay, and then another issue which is close to everybody's heart, I think, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. It concluded 2 years ago, as I'm sure you know. It heard over 7,000 testimonies from victims and survivors, and it ran for 7.5 years. Yet not one of the recommendations has been implemented. We're really pleased that we're having the dialogue with the right lawmakers, but it's still taking time, and that needs to change. We're going to be talking about that a lot today. I'm going to be covering it tomorrow as well as in a workshop. But we are absolutely delighted to welcome our next guest, who needs no introduction, but I will introduce her anyway. Professor Alexis Jay, who was chair of the inquiry for its entire 7.5-year tenure. Professor Jay was also delivered the report into the Rotherham abuse, and since the inquiry has concluded, she has written a report on a review into how to make the church safeguarding fully independent for the Church of England as well. She's also written a review on child criminal exploitation across the UK for Action for Children. We're really proud to have Professor Jay's support here at TST and for our campaign Act on ICSA, which is where we are urging the governments to come together to really make the changes that we need to see some of our key recommendations implemented. So, Professor Jay, can you hear us?
I can.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Professor Jay now. Thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you, Lucy, for your introduction and also for inviting me to address the conference. What Lucy didn't mention, as is obvious that I'm not there in person, but I am on holiday in France, so that might explain some of the background and the fact that I don't have a lectern here, and indeed for any background noises like barking that you might hear in the course of my brief input. I am aware I'm speaking to an audience comprised of people knowledgeable about child sexual abuse and, of course, sexual violence, but also about the work of the public inquiry. And there may be a little repetition from what Lucy's already said, but I, of course, am aware, whether you're from a relevant professional background or from lived experience, I must reiterate at the start that almost without exception, every account of sexual violence or exploitation experienced as a child tells of a life fundamentally altered and affected by the abuse. So in this short talk, I want to provide a brief update from my perspective as chair of the inquiry on the last 2 years since the publication of the Independent Inquiry's final report on October the 20th, 2022, an unfortunate date for us because on that very morning, Liz Truss resigned and somewhat stole some of the media coverage that would have been very helpful. I'll then go on to talk a bit about the criminal exploitation of children and its overlap with sexual exploitation of children. In the debate in both the Commons and the Lords, which quickly followed the publication of the final report, all political parties welcomed the report and urged implementation of its recommendations without delay. But it feels as if all of us who have any kind of interest in the inquiry's outcomes have been, as Lucy said, marking time. There has been considerable media focus on public inquiries in the last few weeks, with the publication of the Grenfell report and the initial COVID report. And indeed, this week, the House of Lords published its own report on statutory inquiries. The creation and work of a statutory public inquiry is based on the Inquiries Act 2005. The most frequently cited criticisms of the present arrangements are that they take too long and are too costly. But for me and many others involved, the lack of provision for follow-up to recommendations made by public inquiries is the major weakness of the present process. In the case of my inquiry, not only did it mean no structured accountability, but the expectations of victims, survivors, and so many others who have been involved had been raised by the nature of the recommendations made and also by the initial positive government response from the then Home Secretary, who was Grant Shapps, who spoke to this in the House of Commons. The government's formal response was then published in May 2023 and was, in my opinion, inadequate and at times disingenuous. Myself and my colleague panel members, Drusilla Sharpling, Ivor Frank, and Sir Malcolm Evans, then wrote to the Times newspaper at the end of May and said as much. And I quote from the published letter. The inquiry lasted 7 years, in the course of which it published 52 reports and made over 100 recommendations in total. These were based on exhaustive investigations, research, consultation, and formal evidence taking under oath from victims, experts, and a wide range of organisations and institutions. By its response, the government seems to have failed to understand the recommendations either in substance or significance. Some are deemed to be accepted when in reality they clearly are not. The wording applied to most of these recommendations was we accept the need for whatever it was, whilst others are conditional on yet more research, review or consultation. To none is a timeline attached or a committed action plan. And we fear that for the sake of other political priorities, action will be deferred indefinitely. Whilst the government is free to reject or partially accept the recommendations of a statutory public inquiry, what it ought not to be free to do is to purport to accept them through what is little more than a very weak and at times apparently disingenuous official response. As a result, the hopes and expectations of victims and survivors will be dashed yet again, and the scourge of child sexual abuse will continue to increase unabated. Thereafter, the publication of that letter, there was a long silence on implementation, broken only by a watered-down version of the mandatory reporting recommendation we had made, but which was lost in the abandoned Criminal Justice Bill prior to the general election. But in my inquiry, we had already taken our own steps to increase public accountability for recommendations made. As we had determined to publish individual reports, including recommendations, as we proceeded with the public hearings, I took the decision that we should follow up recommendations made in each report. And this involved making contact with the both state and non-state organisations we required to implement recommendations. We did this every 6 months to report on progress, which we considered a reasonable time to have taken some form of action. This was then publicly reported on the inquiry website. This meant there was some degree of accountability during the inquiry's lifetime. And we also published a progress report on the final position as at December 2022. The final 20th report made 20 recommendations, some of which were repeated from earlier reports, 6 of them, which we had concluded, where we concluded that the responses to these recommendations were inadequate. And one of the 20 was outrightly rejected, and that concerned the use of pain compliance techniques in certain custodial institutions where children were accommodated. Up until the final report, we had made 87 recommendations, and with a further 20, as I have said. And we continued to monitor these, as I say, in the inquiry's website, but by far the majority of those 87 had been met by this means. But of course, that could not continue beyond March 2023, as that was the time that the inquiry formally ended. The House of Lords report this week commended my inquiry in its regular reporting and publications, which directed recommendations to the specific state and non-state institutions as we worked through our 15 separate investigations, but had a different option regarding implementation monitoring, which was to set up a new independent committee of Parliament which should conduct oversight of public inquiries and monitor the government response and hold the government to account to ensure the inquiry recommendations it has accepted are actually implemented. This recommendation merits consideration, but of course, a House of Lords report of this type does have no enforcement powers and can as easily be ignored. It also commended the Truth Project as a model of good practice, and I'm aware that Lucy will be speaking about this later in the programme. I'll come back to a little more of an update later, but I want now to move on to the criminal exploitation of children. And just to mention that the charity Action for Children asked me to lead a review of this issue last year. The criminal exploitation of children is a form of child abuse. And it very often occurs alongside the sexual abuse of children, and increasing numbers of children are exploited or abused in multiple ways. Action for Children has a long track record of working in this area, which is difficult and sometimes dangerous work. I want to tell you briefly about child criminal exploitation, and then say something about the relationship to child sexual exploitation. As I've said, it's a complex type of child abuse where a young person is manipulated or pressured to take part in criminal activity, usually by adults already involved in serious and organised crime. And it takes a range of forms, dealing and transporting drugs and sometimes weapons, including guns, across the UK, Ireland, and even abroad. Some of you will know a lot about this already because it's often described and referred to as county lines. It can also take the form of growing cannabis and theft and burglary to order, and street crime such as begging and pickpocketing to order. It's often accompanied by multiple types of abuse, including violence, threats to family, emotional and sexual abuse. And the grooming process of children and young people into being criminally exploited is very similar to the process of grooming of children into sexual exploitation. I see many parallels with CSE and my previous work. It's over 10 years, in fact, since my Rotherham report was published, and the similarities are many. Grooming children, gaining their trust, giving them presents, money and friendship, and then trapping them into harmful activity through drugs and alcohol, and keeping them there through coercive control, and often with violent means and threats to family. And of course, targeting those who are seen as more vulnerable, such as children in residential or foster care, or those with disabilities, and those who may be living in poverty. We also know of criminal gangs who, in the grooming process, will situate themselves in parked cars around areas of known deprivation, often in cities. And they identify any children that show any signs of being vulnerable and target them as suitable candidates to groom. I also want to say something about the risk factors involved. Again, there are many similarities here. Previous contact with the youth justice system, being a child in need of or care experienced, poor mental health, special educational needs or disabilities and neurodivergence, alcohol or substance misuse, adverse childhood experiences of many kinds, as I've said, possibly living in poverty or homelessness, exclusion from mainstream education, unsettled immigration status in the UK, and here there are links to the whole modern slavery agenda, and perceived sense of status, belonging or protection being present. And to note, Black and minority ethnic children are overrepresented. So what are the signs of grooming? Sudden changes in friendship groups, regularly going missing. Again, features, many of these are features of child sexual exploitation. Problems in school, unexplained money, unexplained gifts, such as new trainers, unexplained injuries, change of physical appearance, including type of clothes they wear, changes in language, including the use of slang or code words for drugs or sex, experimenting with drugs or alcohol, unsafe use of the internet or spending a lot of time online, being picked up in cars driven by adults whom they don't know, either in whatever setting or the parents don't know, being in a relationship with someone who is much older than them. And not all will always mean, of course, of these aspects or signs of grooming that a child is being exploited. So how big a threat is this to young people? Compared to child sexual abuse, it is impossible to compare, but the threat is very significant. And like CSA, all experts agree it is underestimated in official figures, partly because there is no agreed definition on what it is to be counted, and as partly because it is inevitably hidden from sight. But the information from the agencies concerned shows a growing demand for services and support, and much increased waiting lists. What does the government need to do? As it stands, the system's too complex, uncoordinated, not child-centred enough, a lot of good individual initiatives, but a patchwork of services and a postcode lottery. It needs a national strategy to pull it all together across the home countries, as the problem has many cross-boundary elements. It also needs a specific offence of criminal exploitation of children to be introduced. As a final kind of reference to this whole area of the criminal exploitation of children, I've frequently been asked in the media about how shocked I was by the accounts in private session that we heard from young people and their parents. And I was. The casual violence was shocking. Not just knives, but guns, machetes, hammers, baseball bats, swords and axes were used, according to the evidence of some of the young people. And not just in gang encounters, or rival gang encounters, I should say, but in punishment if the child failed to comply with instructions. I was saddened by what initially attracted children as young as 11 into this life. Many liked the closeness of being part of a gang or group with a common purpose, apparently having friends for the first time, and having money that stopped them feeling ashamed of not being able to afford the right kind of trainers or jackets, or even stopped them from being hungry. On one occasion, we heard of a child being bought a sandwich, which was enough to draw them into exploitation. Some were pleased to be able to give their mothers money to help out. The parents described their desperation, not knowing where to turn to or who to talk to about what was going on, for fear of the children getting into more trouble. They never knew where their children were or when they would be back, or in some cases, whether they were dead or alive. And some children have actually been murdered in the past year. I believe it amounted to 12 different children, where the links to child criminal exploitation was likely to have been the root cause of murder in these cases. So I know many of you here will already be familiar with this increasing threat to children and young people. But in child protection terms, it's so important to keep in mind the bigger picture of the trauma and damage being done often simultaneously to children and young people. Not just sexual violence, but being drawn into potential life of criminality. And I hope it's been informative. But returning to the implementation issues of the public inquiry, we now await the response of the new government. I have met the Minister for Safeguarding as part of the Survivors Trust Act on ICSA initiative and heard encouraging statements. But of course, action and timescales is what we all want to see. And I look forward to hearing the Minister's video message to us at the conference. Finally, I want to thank all of the individuals and organisations who have campaigned for the inquiry's recommendations to be implemented. But even more may be asked of you. It was and will continue to be necessary to keep all of these issues of sexual violence and criminality towards children and adults in the public domain until relevant state and non-state institutions change and societal cultures change to make their safety and protection an absolute priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Jay. It's so insightful, and I always think when we know that you're the expert in an area and then you come up with even more in a different area, it's absolutely incredible to hear from you. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes for questions for Professor Jay now, if anybody has any, which is another rare and exciting opportunity. So, she is still there. There she is. So if anybody would like to, if you put your hand up, we've got a roving mic. And can I have a TST team member to run round, please? Thanks, Helen. Or comments at all? Over there, yeah.
Is that on?
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to say, having been there at the beginning when the inquiry had a difficult start and we went through a number of chairs, I wanted to say thank you for myself and hopefully on behalf of some others, that actually it was amazing that actually you held steady and actually took over the role of chair, which was quite poisoned at that point, and that you have continued to show such commitment and dedication to the cause of the endurance of children, the things that have happened to them, but also the silence that surrounds the reports as well. So it's not a question, it's, I suppose, other than to say, how did you manage to do that, to stay steady in face of such opposition from the media, from the government, and also from survivors at the time?
Thank you very much for your kind words. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah,
okay,
thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry I can't see your face, but but thank you very much indeed for what you've said. And it was a very accurate summation of the difficult start. And it's always good when to hear that people understood what was involved in all of that. I have often thought about the actual question you posed about how did you survive it, I think it amounted to. But I honestly believed that it was my public duty to do it. And I know that sounds pious, but it was the case that I at that point would have been the fourth chair, the second of the statutory inquiry, and there had been two previous chairs of the non-statutory inquiry. And my strong sense was that the inquiry could not go out to the market, as it were, to find another chair, that it needed to be one of us. It's actually one of the problems with the 2005 Act, that it's very unclear as to how we go about replacing a chair. And some chairs of public inquiries have simply had to retire because of illness or whatever. But nevertheless, it was a very difficult time. I was supported by some excellent people, including the panel, and some who are present with you today. And I was determined that we just needed to get a plan and get everything in order. And the only way we could overcome this was by doing it. So that would be the strong message. Get on with it. Prove that this can be done. It's far too important. It was and is far too important to be consigned to the sidelines, as it has sometimes felt when the work of the inquiry was done, and we are still waiting for implementation. But thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Hi, Professor Jay, it's Chris here. I had a long chat with John last night about how we can, as organisations, ask the government to act and respond to the lack of implementation of the ICSA recommendation. So what advice would you have to all of the organisations in the room to come together in order to drive forwards on this and to act on ICSA? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I think people need to hear it from you rather than me.
Thank you very much, Chris, for your question. I think I'm not sure I have many more answers to it than the people in the room with you, but there is the opportunity with a new government to hear from them and to continue, I'm afraid, campaigning to say, in case they might have missed it, this issue is too serious. We cannot let it go. We've heard some of the support, of course, already in relation to violence against women and girls, but I'm afraid we all need to work together, take collective action where possible, and use every opportunity with a range of elected members to influence them. The inquiry doesn't have any resources any longer. Of course, it doesn't exist. And those of us who've remained involved are very grateful to organisations who've taken on the role of supporting us, such as the Survivors Trust. And I don't have any clear answers other than that we have to find our way into the media in a serious and responsible way and convey what has and has not happened. And as I've said, very little has happened about the recommendations. In fact, almost nothing. So we have an opportunity here and we just have to seize it as best we can.
Thank you, Professor Jay. Just want to make the point as well, we talk a lot about ICSA and act on ICSA, and we're under no illusions that in doing so, this is going to completely reform or end child protection, as we said, child sexual abuse or adult sexual violence. But it is a huge step in the right direction, and we need to see that our politicians are committed to doing that. I think all of our biggest fear is that in 20 years' time, the generation behind us are having to have an inquiry as to how we got it so wrong, when we already know the answers. But there's a lot going around at the moment about violence against women and girls or child sexual exploitation. This is a big umbrella, as we know. We need to end all sexual violence and the effect it has on everybody. And I think this is just one element of that. And we're really excited to be working on it all together. We also here have Chris Tuck, who you will be hearing from later as well, who was a member of the Victim and Survivor Consultative Panel at ICSA. We also have John O'Brien, who was Secretary to ICSA. So I suggest you go to the networking events and bug them for more questions as to how we're going to do this. Thank you. Professor Jay, we won't take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have lovely weather where you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're shortly going to hear from one of our members from the Survivors Forum, Samantha Hunt. Samantha, I don't know where you are. Are you in here? Sorry, I can't see. Oh, yes, brilliant. Hi, sorry. Thank you. Which we're really excited about. As I said, we do lots of forums at the Survivors Trust, and we use them to influence and advise on many of the projects we work on, and so we're really excited and proud of that. And now obviously we can do lots of them in person. So Samantha, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say in a minute. But as we wrote to you a couple of days ago with some changes, Minister Jess Phillips isn't able to be here today, but she did send us a pre-record, so we will play that for you.
Hello everyone.
Now, there you go.
I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person. I want to express my support for your important work and emphasise the government's commitment to treating sexual violence and violence against women and girls as a national emergency that it is. Firstly, to all of you who dedicate so much of yourselves to supporting victims and survivors. Hello everyone. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person. I want to express my support for your important work and emphasise the government's commitment to treating sexual violence and violence against women and girls as a national emergency that it is. Firstly, to all of you who dedicate so much of yourselves to supporting victims and survivors, thank you. For them, you are quite literally a lifeline. When they feel hopeless, you give them hope. The work you do is demanding and distressing. And as many of you know, I know that firsthand from having done this work myself, and I know how tough it can be. So please remind yourself today of the difference that you are making. In the past year, your members have supported 100,000 survivors through helplines, counselling, support groups and other services, and you are driving the entire sector forward. You have set up 5 new rape centres, trained 200 independent sexual violence advisors, played a major role in campaigning, and now underpin 120 specialist services that survivors are depending on. As Minister for Safeguarding, it is my role to make sure you have everything you need to meet the growing demand for support. The latest crime survey figures estimate that sexual assault has impacted over 1 in 4 women and 1 in 20 men. Demand is growing for support services across the country. Victim Support reported a 3-fold increase in annual referrals for sexual assault cases, from 9,000 to almost 27,000 in just 5 years. This is intolerable. My job is to show you how serious the new government is about change. And I mean real change, not the kind of change that we've always been promised. There has been a lot of talk about tackling sexual violence in recent years, and it would be unfair to say that no action has been taken. Dedicated people across various sectors have worked tirelessly, but change has been too slow. It is almost 2 years since the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse published its report. I have met the chair of the inquiry in my ministerial capacity and will be working with colleagues across government to prioritise the tackling child sexual abuse agenda. And we will go further. The Prime Minister and Home Secretary are totally committed to tackling this national emergency, and our mission is to halve all forms of violence against women and girls in a decade. Meeting this goal will require real change. And by that, I don't just mean those like yourselves who are working on these issues every day. I mean the whole of society. This won't be easy, but we have a real opportunity now to achieve fundamental, systematic change that is needed. Thank you for all your outstanding work, which gives me hope that we can succeed. I wish you an excellent conference.
There's some powerful words there, but it's great to hear that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister are committed to this. I'm sure it will take a collective effort for all of us to continue to highlight the work that we do and keep that conversation open. So for now, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Sam Hunt to come up and join us. Sam, as I said, is from our Survivors Forum. She's going to talk to you today about her experience. Sam, do you want a roving mic, or are you happy here? Great, thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Samantha. I'm not a professional speaker, so if I do waffle or go on a bit, Joyce promised to pull some faces at me. Oh, no, I'm going. I was just going to mention, on my drive here this morning, I was listening to an audio book called Coat Bridge, the Moira Anderson story. And it's about a young girl that she may have died at the hands of a perpetrator who had potentially sexually abused 120 children. And it was back in 1957. And the lady that was telling the story, you know, there was nothing like this. There was no charities, or if there were, they were very unheard of. Families were aware of the abuse that was going off, but it was such a shame to talk about it. It was such an embarrassment that it was kind of swept under the carpet. So if you're wondering why it's really important what you do, I think for Moira Anderson, that little girl in Scotland, that, you know, had there been something like yourselves back then, those children that were abused may have had an avenue to go down, and Moira might not have died. So yeah, I'm Samantha. I'm 52. I guess I'm one of the most fortunate people in the fact that my perpetrator was sent to prison in 2018 for 22 years, and that was my father. My mother should have been with him, really, because she was very compliant in the abuse, but there was nothing to, no sort of evidence to charge her with. Growing up, I think there was a lot of red flags that I was being abused as a child. It wasn't violent, it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't the sort of, if you ask someone who's not been abused, if they think about abuse, they think of someone like a dirty, horrible, violent person that has done it against their will. I was groomed as a child from a very young age and grew up thinking it was actually perfectly normal to be abused. And unfortunately, probably willingly did it because it meant that I could go out, or I could wash my hair, or I could wear a skirt. So, yeah, I tried to report my abuse. I called Childline, and then I got scared, and I rang them back and asked them not to do anything, and they didn't. When I had my first child in 1992, I reported him and he was arrested. There was no charities that I was put in touch with, there was no help, and lots of family members put pressure on me because I was bringing shame to my family, and so I dropped the charges. However, in 2015, I was very supported by my second husband and family to report what my father had done, and I'd like to say I did have a very positive journey through that, because it was. The police treated me extremely well. I visited one of the many SARC centres. I was appointed an ISFA, and they supported me all the way through. They supported me in coming and sitting in the first initial interview statement. They were there at the court. They was there through the whole journey. Some of the things that really helped me in that journey was being able to ask questions and repeat myself. And when I say repeat myself, the littlest thing, from going to the courtroom and having a look round, I had loads of questions, and I continued to ask those questions over and over again. And my ISFA was great. She must have heard those questions, not just by me 100 times, but throughout her support hundreds and hundreds of times. And just as a point, sometimes it must be really hard to hear what you hear. But just remember, that's the first time that person has probably asked you that question. That's the first time they've probably disclosed that. In 2018, I was lucky enough, and I use the word lucky because when I realised the statistics afterwards, I think I am lucky. He was sentenced and he's now in prison for 22 years. And afterwards, I felt like I had to do something. I had to normalise disclosure. I had to make it seem that it was absolutely okay to talk about it. It's not my shame. It's not, I've not done anything wrong. And I wanted to normalise that as the best way I can. And about 2 years ago, I got in touch with the Survivors Trust, and they very kindly said that I could join one of their forums. And the forums meet every couple of months, and at the moment we are supporting the CPS in changes to how victims are approached via letters, videos, etc. And it's an interesting piece of work, because I'm quite shocked actually when we started at some of the words that are used. And so if you ever ask yourself, why am I doing this? Or, you know, those days when you must go home and think, gosh, I've heard so many harrowing things. It's because you're making a change. You're making children like Maura Anderson back in the 1950s be able to have a voice. You're making myself, who in the 1970s and the 1980s, who didn't know where to turn to and who didn't know who to talk to, they had a voice as well. So yeah. I'm not sure what else you would like me to tell you, but I'm very open to questions and quite happy to answer anything. So if you have got any questions for me, please.
Thank you so much, Martha. Thank you, it's fantastic. I think we're so delighted to have Samantha talking about CPS as well, because obviously, as we know, that we'll be talking about that more over the next few days. It's more than just a sentence right now. I did just want to say as well, if anybody knows anybody or anybody is interested in joining our forums, please do let us know. All you need to do is come and find one of the members of our team and give us your details. We're particularly looking for people at the moment who have gone through the CPS. But for now, has anybody got any questions for Samantha? Down here, thanks. Hello.
Hello, I'm David Greenwood from Sweetowski's.
Hello.
I've worked with lots of survivors over the years, but I'm interested to ask, what do you get out of the forums?
What do I get out of the forums? That's a really good question. The fact that I'm making a change, the fact that potentially another victim who is going through what I went through in 2016 to 2018, he's been given the right information and being delivered that information in a way that's not upsetting or triggering. I had no contact with the CPS during my period. It took about 2.5 years to go to court. When I've looked at some of the letters and the way that they deliver the information from the CPS, it would shock me, and I would find it quite triggering actually, some of it. So the fact that the CPS are listening to myself and my other forum members and making those changes means that I've made a difference, and I'm making it easier for one more person to disclose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi Samantha, I'm Erica.
Hello, Erica.
Thank you for your presentation. Apart from what you've just said about your work with the CPS and helping you to move forward, what else kind of post-trauma has helped you to move on and develop a new healthy life for yourself?
I've wrote a blog that some charities have used and actually the police have used, and that was about my journey from reporting my father to when he was sentenced. Something I'm really proud of, so I work for a company called Pentagon, and with the charity's support we've got 15 support ambassadors now within my workplace who are there to signpost and help any victims of abuse. So that's really helped me, and that's given me a sense of purpose that I can make a difference, because sometimes as a survivor of abuse you think, well, what can I do? What can I do? Well, actually you can do something. And even as raising awareness about sexual violence and abuse, domestic abuse, non-recent abuse, now my workplace, and there's about 1,100 people, they've got somewhere to go. So yeah, I get a sense of well-being out of that.
Hi, I'm Chrissy, also here as a survivor. It was amazing to hear your journey. As someone who's also moving into this space in terms of turning pain into power and sort of starting to speak out and kind of the activism around this, how have you found the transition, especially since the kind of court thing's relatively recent? How do you find being in this space? How do you manage it? Do you find it difficult sometimes?
I should say yes, but I don't actually. I don't know if it was because he was sentenced, or for the fact that I was believed, or the fact that the judge, for me, my mother couldn't be part of the trial and she couldn't be charged, but she was very compliant with my abuse growing up. But the judge picked up on that, and he acknowledged that when he addressed my father, when he sentenced him, by saying, you and your wife. That, and the fact that the police, the ISFAs, my family and friends at the time, it was the fact that I was believed. And I think a lot of that had come about after Gary Glitter and Jimmy Savile, and I hate to say the names, but it brought awareness, and so I was believed, and I never had been believed up till then, because I didn't have a relationship with my parents. Older generations would almost criticise me and say, oh, you've only got one mother, you've only got one father, you know, you should have a relationship with them. And I felt like, well, I can't just blurt out and say. So, yeah, I think, no, it doesn't affect me. It actually makes me feel really proud. And I feel, when I remember speaking to Joy when I joined, I said, I just want to be able to speak up for people who can't speak up. And I've got a big mouth. So I was going to say another word. I've got a big mouth, and I can shout out and speak for all those people, and also to raise awareness that not all sexual abuse is violent. Mine wasn't violent, and I don't tend to hear about that as often.
No, yeah, absolutely agree.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you.
Anybody else? Got one more. Thank you. I've got a question actually, Samantha.
Yes.
If obviously life happens, challenges in life happen. We get divorced, people die. That's what happens to all of us. And I know that as a survivor, that can feel quite triggering. And there's a bit of a, this happens to me. It's worse because of what has experienced. What I've experienced. How do you deal with those elements of life that are challenging, that are there anyway, and maybe potentially the triggers, don't like that word hugely, but the triggers around abuse and how that impacts those things?
I can speak on my own personal situation that I've had to deal with. So unfortunately I lost my son in January this year. He was 30 and he suddenly died. How did I deal with it? Knowing that he was really, really proud of what I was doing, and proud of the fact that I spoke out, and he gave me and my other two children, gave me the courage, because you do have to take into account. One thing I never fully took on board when I was reporting my abuse and everything is the fact that what it has on other people. Maybe I was a bit selfish and thinking, oh, this is all about me and how I feel. I never really thought about how it affected my children. A cousin who'd spent time with me as a child in my family home, a next door neighbour whose bedroom was the other side of mine, and that really traumatised her. But the messages I got, and people that spoke to me and told me what a difference I was making, made me feel stronger, and probably in a little way helped me deal with Jack's death, in the fact it made me stronger, made me think about positive things I can do, and made me think about when Jack died, how do I turn that into a positive and look at it as celebrate his life. We didn't have a funeral. We didn't attend a cremation. We had a private one that we didn't know the date or time. It was all about celebrating and being positive about his life. And I do think to some elements what I did by putting my father into prison has given me an inner strength.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. We're very lucky to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'm sure Sam will be around, obviously, for the whole 2 days. So,
Yes.
and in networking, if you have any more questions,
Thank you.
very
Thank
much.
you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, it's now time to be going for coffee, and I think Vicky has told you where they are. I just want to say two things. You've all been given a lanyard, which I'm not even wearing. I was about to say everyone has to wear it at all times. Please make sure you are. The venue told us if you don't wear them, they'll challenge you, and I tested it last night and they did. So do wear this for security, obviously. I know goes without saying as well, we've already touched on some really difficult subjects today. Please do take care of yourselves. You are grown-ups and you are obviously familiar with this subject and working it, or you wouldn't be here. And as I said earlier, we're absolutely delighted you are. But we've tried to get a real balance for the next couple of days. There's some really exciting things going on later today, which you will hear about. We've also just had Chris say that she's going to do a silent disco for us this evening. So if anybody wants to do that, thank you very much, Chris. Silent disco headset walk. Okay, got it. Great, thank you. And you do not want to be late after coffee for your workshop. Apart from the fact that it's disrespectful to our amazing speakers, we have some absolutely incredible speakers. We have Wayne and Andy talking about the digital landscape, which I know has been extremely popular as well. We have Linda talking about safe and inclusive support services for dual status clients. Really interesting topic, which is something which I think many of our services are increasingly having to deal with. Carol delivering boom or bust funding, which again, I think we all need to know more about. And then Chris talking about health and nutrition for recovery from primary and vicarious trauma. I would like to go to all of them, but please make sure you aren't late. We are running over time, so they are going to start at 11:30 on the dot. You will find your room and you'll be told you should know where it is. The signs are everywhere, so if you aren't sure, do just take a few minutes before it starts to familiarise yourself. And after that, we will be going straight to lunch. I've missed something because... Sorry, before you all go, please wait.
I think there's a few people who haven't signed up for a particular workshop yet. If you can just go to Lisa at reception to do that, that'll be grand. Similarly, if you can't remember which one you're in, Lisa's got a list for everyone. Just a final thing, because we've all been getting lost all morning in this rabbit warren, we're going to have TST team members to take you to your rooms if you need it. If you're in the Victory Suite down here, it's this. You can manage that. The Boom and Bust funding is downstairs, and then the other two, the health and nutrition and the dual status clients, are upstairs. So, Julie York, Julie will be taking people to the health and nutrition, so she'll meet you upstairs in the coffee area? Yep. Kate, where's Kate? Kate Williams?
There,
Kate will meet you and take you to the dual status clients, and then we've got Seema will take you to the Boom and Bust funding, meeting you downstairs. Lucy, you don't need to guide people to this room particularly.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank you.
and then straight after that, off to the main building for lunch.
Yeah, and then to the people at home, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you back here at 2:00 for the people at home after lunch. Coffee is through that door there on the right, and there's one upstairs as well. There's 2 different coffee pods. The toilets are down here and down there, and then above us either side as well. Okay, I could go exits. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.